Oh, perfect. So, welcome everyone. Really looking forward to our event, our webinar tonight. I'll give you a bit of background information, some context about kind of what this whole purpose is. We'll introduce all of our panelists. Also, we'll provide an opportunity for any questions that you might have. Welcome. This is great. I see people, attendees are already coming in, so it's great to see. My name is Adam Jelinas. I'm the founder, the clinic director here at First Step Men's Therapy. We're a men's mental health clinic. We operate across the province of Ontario. We have an office in Ottawa, and spoiler alert, we're going to be potentially opening an office coming up. I'm not going to say that where we're going to have it yet, but keep your eyes posted for our social media pages and all that kind of stuff. So June is Men's Mental Health Month, and so in honor of that, and just to reflect the work that we do helping men across the province, we really wanted to have a platform to kind of, have men who are curious about therapy. Maybe they've been in therapy before, maybe they've never been in therapy at all, to kind of ask some questions, learn from the panelists, from the therapists that are here tonight, so we can really kind of get a sense for how can we really promote and honor that men can and do and should seek therapy whenever they would like. So welcome. Hopefully this is helpful for you. Well, you will have access to a recording as well, but it's really hopefully interactive for you, and hopefully you can ask some questions. We get a lot of first timers that come to First Step Men's Therapy. Sometimes they're in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, even 60s and 70s, and it's the first time that they've ever been in therapy. So it's really, really cool to see. I'm going to go through a quick disclaimer, and then what we're going to do is we're going to throw it over to all of our panelists just to introduce themselves. Okay. So the content that's being presented here in this webinar is really intended for educational purposes. The information that's provided, it's only considered to be, sort of things to reflect on, and not a substitute for therapy, counseling, or any other type of mental health service. The presenters that you see here, they're going to be sharing their knowledge based on their own current understanding and the practices in their respective fields. Any of the attendees, either here tonight or who will be watching it later on, are should be encouraged to seek professional advice and assistance for their own individual concerns and challenges. Okay. By attending this webinar, you acknowledge that the organizers, presenters, and our clinic as a whole are not responsible for any actions taken based on the content shared here during the session. All right, I got the legal part out of the way. Let's throw it over to our panelists. These are all therapists within our clinic. We've got a very diverse, very unique team of over 15 therapists, and this is just a handful of them, but great team that's behind me. So I'm going to go in order of the ones that I see here. So we'll go with Imad first. If you want to unmute, just introduce yourself and a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. So my name is Ahmad Zahedi. I'm a registered psychotherapist. Honestly, the main reason why I wanted to get into this field was at a particularly challenging time of my life, where I was in a really bad spot because of circumstances and a lot of my own kind of errors. I found myself in a really tough spot, and I didn't really think therapy was going to be effective, to be perfectly honest. It seemed too overwhelming, too final. It didn't seem like there's a point to it. But I was encouraged by my girlfriend and my family to go to therapy, and that really did save my life. It changed my life. And so because I was on the other side of this, that was really the inspiration behind why I wanted to kind of go into this field. I hope I can be as effective to a few people as my therapist was to me, but that's a little bit about me and kind of why I got into this field. So I encourage anyone who's in that kind of a place where it seems maybe overwhelming or there's no way out. I think if you adhere to the truth, and if you adhere to accepting reality and not deceiving yourself or others, and take a few steps, take a first step towards your mental health, I think it can make a big difference. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for that. I mean, it really speaks to, like, we each have our own story, and a lot of us get into this, like you said, through our own personal journeys. We'll go with Nick next.
My name is Nick Dukran, and I'm a psychotherapist. This is my second career, and similar to Ahmad, had a wonderful time on the client side. I did not want to go to therapy, and very begrudgingly and with a lot of anger and upsetness, I picked up the phone and started that process, and pleasantly had an amazing time. It was much more transformative and shaped me. And then in sort of considering my own personality, gifts, and strengths, realized there was quite an overlap between being a therapist and who I was as a human. And so I'm one of the fortunate people that get to converge on my personality and strengths as well as find a meaningful career. So here I am.
Thanks, Nick. We'll go with Morella next.
Hello, I am Mela Smith, and I am a registered social worker. Also a certified sex addiction therapist. So that is or a candidate still, but very close to getting my full credentials. That is the type of work that I do here at First Step. I work with individuals that are struggling with addictive and compulsive behaviors around pornography and sex. I also work with their spouses, and I work with couples as well.
Thank you. Awesome, Morella. And last but not least, Matthew.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Matthew Masholi. One of the reasons why I got into therapy, I would say, is there's a few for sure. One of the main ones is that I was at a crossroads in my life as well, just thinking about what I wanted to do with my career and how I wanted to spend the next 40 years or so of my life. So I looked back and I reflected on what I thought about myself and what I thought my strengths would be and how they would maybe line up with being a therapist, kind of what Nick was saying as well. But I was also reflecting on what people around me in my support system have told me over the years. And maybe I didn't spend enough time and energy with that over the years. And then one day it kind of clicked that maybe I should put more weight into this. And I finally realized, people over the years have always said that they could see me in this field. And I finally put a spotlight on that. And with that and my own, realizations and research, I'm like, yeah, you know what, I think I could probably do this. And with that helped build a launching pad for me to get into the field. So yeah, that's a bit of my story there.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Matthew. We've got Jordan. Jordan just had a client, so he's jumping on. So we're just introducing ourselves, telling everyone just a little bit about our story, why we're here, how we got here, that kind of.
Cool. So I'm Jordan. I've been in the field for about 8 years now. I'm a registered social worker, but I have a psychology and counseling psychology background. And after having some challenges when I was younger, both as a child and then older teenager, saw where my skill set kind of lied, and being an empath and people trusting in me for even when I was younger with their secrets and things that they found private, embarrassing, that sort of thing. It kind of led me to, okay, this is what I can do to help people. I'm not skilled in things like math and science and things like that. I am in the social science field for sure. So that led me to first working with kids and teens after my practicum. And then I saw like I really wanted to work with younger men, older men. I definitely saw that I could help with what I have personal experience with. So things like anxiety, just life stress, interpersonal issues, job stress, what to do with things like schooling, your life path, and that sort of thing. And that's what I've been doing for the last few years now, and it's been great.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really fortunate. I have a great team behind me. I always say it takes a team to really support our mission to help men, and these 5 individuals are just great assets to have, not only for us as a clinic but for all the clients that they serve. I'll give a brief kind of like background to myself. You might have seen it on some of the videos or some of the promotional things that we put out, and then we'll kind of get started. I created the First Step Men's Therapy in 2021, but it was really a few years before that where I struggled with my own mental health. I was around mid 30s and I'd never seen a therapist. I was like the typical, I would never see it. I'd rather tough it out, Google it, read a self-help books. I had every self-help book you could imagine, and those helped me to a certain degree. But I noticed there was something I was lacking, and I was really, really struggling with my mental health. I hit sort of a crisis. I like to define it as an existential crisis. Um, and I went and I was like, I had to see a therapist. I have to go talk to somebody about this. I couldn't talk to my family and friends. I wanted someone who was impartial and sort of non-judgmental. Not to say that everyone around me is judgmental, but I wanted someone who had like a third, a second opinion. And that really was the catalyst for me to recognize, wow, the power in telling my story of hearing, and mirroring a lot of what I said, but getting some perspective, getting some, suggestions, getting some resources. And that really set me off into like, I think I really want to help other people too. And so that's sort of why we're here. First step, there's a lot of people, especially for men, we're a men's dedicated clinic. Really just sending that email or making that phone call, taking that first step is so powerful. And it can be so hard, but so powerful. So welcome everyone. We're going to kind of do a little bit of a conversational style, question and answer. If you have questions for the panel, there is a chat function that will go to me. You can put it as anonymous, which is great. Any questions you might have about anything that comes up or any questions about therapy, I'd love to put them to our panel here. So please make use of that if you would like. So, I mean, the first question I have for the panel is, we tend to see a lot of people coming in and it's their first time and they've never spoken to a therapist. They've never, this is the first time they've reached out. There's usually a lot of like apprehension or anxiety. And I'm curious why you think that is, especially with the male population. What is it you think? There's societal, cultural barriers. What prevents people from really taking that first step until maybe it's, kind of crisis point or a recognition that something has to change? Who wants to go first?
I can go first. I don't mind. For me, at least this is my experience, and it's not necessarily, the only perspective, obviously, but I think in large part, there's a lot of stigma around, men and therapy, and, like you said, you tough it out and it's fine, I think part of that, I think one other aspect that's important, I think, is that a lot of guys that I've spoken to, and they get to a point where they reach that, as you call it, existential crisis or any kind of an emergency point where ultimately the pain of not getting help exceeded the pain of getting help, so to speak. I think they reach a point where it's not necessarily that there's a mental illness. It's not necessarily that something so bad has happened. I think a lot of times it's the overwhelming effect, the stacking of too many little things. The first three problems were not a problem, the fourth one not a problem, but seven things at the same time then it becomes an emergency. And I think a lot of times it's as simple as helping people manage their time, manage their life, manage which problem to tackle first, put things in perspective, put a hierarchy of what to tackle first and in what order. And I think that makes a big difference. I think starting from the basics and the foundations helps a lot of guys who start off and they don't know where to begin. They don't know why they're here. They don't even, I think that's in my experience has been helpful.
Awesome. Thanks, Imad. Marilla.
A lot of the clients that I see are coming to me at a crisis point. And so it is a really vulnerable time, I think. And so it's quite intimidating to sit with someone, essentially a stranger, and to really talk about your most intimate struggles. So I think for most people coming to therapy, they come with a little trepidation because they also often feel like they're the only ones struggling with their particular issue. And so when we can validate for them that, you know, they are experiencing something that a lot of other people experience as well, when we can validate for them that we know that their problem is not who they are, then that can help ease some of the hesitation around therapy.
That's a great point, Marilla. Yeah, I agree. I'm not alone anymore, right? Other people are struggling with this. I hear that a lot. Jordan, you want to say something?
Sure. I one thing I find a lot is when somebody comes for the first time, is they don't know what to expect. That's something I hear all the time. Is I didn't know what to expect. I'm really nervous, and I always start with usually the same thing is like you see that environment around me. Like I don't have a a chair you might see from like a movie of the psychoanalyst. I don't do psychoanalysis, right? I'm not gonna have you lay down. I'm not gonna, get you to regress back to your childhood within 10 minutes and all that stuff. And, make them just kind of feel comfortable that and for real, that's not what we do, right? And that you run the show in terms of what we talk about, right? Like I would say I'm not your boss, I'm not a teacher, right? Like you can't fail me. And my job is I just bring a skill set and some knowledge here and some understanding, and that, I'm helping you work through things. I always say like navigate things, right? And that's all this is. And I say the spectrum of what people come to therapy for is so big, and they have assumptions with that a lot is the classic, like, well, there has to be something wrong with you to go. I say, I have this spectrum of people that they'll tell me, oh, I just happen to have work benefits, and I believe in holistic health and just doing everything I can to stay healthy. So they just come and talk about whatever they want. To the complete opposite end, I'm in crisis and there's something really bad going on. I could lose my job or anything like that. And a lot of times it's somewhere in between that, right? Like I'm managing, but not too well. Right? So when I tell, especially men that, then, they can kind of breathe a little bit, and then they see like, okay, yeah, so this is what's going on. And, and then they can really ease in, and like, it's just dispelling those. It's not even, of course there's stigma, but it's also just like assumptions that they had. I find that that's a big one too.
Mm-hmm.
Great point. And there's no wrong way to do the therapy, right? I mean, from
Yeah.
my perspective, both ends are equally valid, right? And they're just maybe different interpretations, I think, right?
Yeah.
Matthew, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I want to jump in. So for me, I think that what holds a lot of people back.
Oh, I think we lost Matthew. Oh, we lost him. All right. Hopefully he had something profound to say, and he's gonna come back and say in a sec. But let's see. Matthew, are you there?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
sorry, it cut out there. Can you hear me okay now?
It's kind of choppy. It's kind of
Oh
choppy.
shoot.
We can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you can hear me. All right.
Yeah. Let's throw it over to Nick, and we'll let you kind of sort that out for a second.
Okay.
Nick, Jordan mentioned a really good point around like people wondering what therapy looks like, getting a sense for that. And I'm curious, what do you feel therapy looks like with you, or what does therapy look like with you? I mean, I think that's an answer we could all have different sort of perspectives on. And what's sort of maybe your approach when you get a client for the first time, they've never been in therapy before, and they show up to the session. What's that look like for you? What sort of things do you sort of explore with them?
No, that's a great question. The one of the analogies I start off with in the first session is I say, if you've never done therapy, think about it like massage therapy. So if you had a tight back, and you go to get a massage, it hurts, it feels good. The therapeutic part is getting the massage and hopefully you walk out better. Same with us. So what we might talk about might hurt, it might feel good. The therapeutic part is getting to talk and almost kind of stumble your way towards your goals and progress and curiosities. And hopefully you walk out better. So that's kind of the analogy I like to start things off with. In terms of what it kind of looks like, I try to think about it in three categories. So one is there might be just the sounding board. Maybe you have a lot going on and you just need to verbally process and get it out. And sometimes just getting it off your chest, if you've ever done that with a trusted friend or a family member, it's not even like an answer. It's just, oh, okay, now I feel better. So some of it is quite literally just the soundboarding with another human being. Another aspect is kind of the skill development. There's a deficit between what I need in life and my ability to kind of exercise that. And so sometimes the what bridges the gap there is a skill. And the last thing is almost like a restructuring. Something structurally is off in my life and something big picture needs to change. And so that might open up a broader conversation about maybe conversations with family or finding a new job or transitioning into a new chapter of life. And so I try to kind of think about it in those three buckets, kind of the soundboard, the skill development, and the structure or the restructuring, I guess. So
Awesome. Yeah, I like to give the analogy of going to the gym after New Year's resolution, and you're pumped and you got your new membership, your new shoes, your headband, and you show up and the first, few times you go to the gym, your muscles are sore, you're tired, you're like, why did I even get this stupid annual pass? But there's a lot of growth through the pain, right? And I know for a lot of our clients, it's usually those first few sessions, it's the first time they've ever shared something like that with somebody, right? And so there is that sort of mental fatigue or that sort of mental maybe ache, but there's a lot of growth and a lot of healing through that, right? Much like going to the gym and working out. Let's go with Imad.
Sorry. So for me, my general approach, look, I think it's important to be very broad with what approaches you're willing to take, because I think it really does differ from client to client. And I think the proper way, at least in my opinion, of looking at the therapeutic relationship is to co-author a plan forward to go from where someone is to where they want to go. Having said that, though, I think there's some principal core things that I work around that I think are important to any kind of therapy session. And that's, it's like the example I use is like a navigation system of a car, right? If you want to go somewhere new, the obvious piece of information is the destination where you want to go. I want to get here. But the less obvious piece of information is that there's no navigation system on the planet that can navigate you to where you want to go if it doesn't know where it is, right? So sometimes it's important to find out where are we exactly, what's good, what's bad, what outcome are we looking for, and why we're looking for that outcome. These questions, I think, are kind of more fundamental to the where do I want to go. And with approaches, I think that it's important. Some clients, depending on their needs, they have very, very, very difficult lives, and so they just need literally a place to come vent. I have clients who come and I literally barely can say 5 words because there's so much going on that that once a week comes, they just need to kind of let loose, and that's fine. But my own preference with clients, because I feel like it's most results oriented, outcome oriented, which is kind of my I don't want to say strength, but my kind of has been my approach so far is I like to get results. I like to I think the type of clients who do best with me are those who are hungry for the next step, whatever that may be, driven and kind of solution focused. And I'm acutely aware of the fact that that doesn't work for a lot of people. It's a kind of love it or hate it approach, so I get it. But yeah, that's been kind of my experience. So hope that helps.
Thanks. And Jordan, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think earlier it was brought up relating it to massage therapy. It's funny because I always say my thing is I say it's like physiotherapy, because I know a few physiotherapists and I've been a bunch of times myself from sports injuries and things. And the biggest thing a physiotherapist would say, from my experience, biggest obstacle for them is people will come in with an injury and they want to come to their appointments and receive treatment, receive exercises, but then they are given homework, and the homework is, you must then, from now until next Wednesday, a week from now, or whatever it is, do these exercises at home or at a gym, right? And then that's how we'll progress. Now, sometimes people do that, and sometimes people don't. So then they return to the next treatment, and they say, "Well, how did the exercises go?" And they go, "Oh, I didn't really do them," right? And then they explain why it's really important to do that, and that's how the progression happens. So I always explain to clients that that's how it'll go. Is, I say about 50% takes place in session, and then 50% actually takes place outside. So you have homework. It's not like schoolwork. Homework. I always try to make it practical and realistic. And there are things that you're going to try to implement in your life, especially in the challenging areas. And then I'm going to help you navigate that. You'll come back. How did things go? Somebody might say it went really well here, but then it still was very challenging here. And we'll look at what went well, but then we'll say, okay, what next steps can we take with that? But with what didn't go well, what other approaches can we take? That might be me explaining something like, okay, you know what? This means we're going to kind of go with this approach to therapy. Say it's cognitive behavior therapy. I would explain what that is and why it's important. Explain things like biopsychosocial approach, which means we want to look at everything holistic. Like, I know you're here to deal with your mental health, but mental health has to do with things like quality sleep. Are you eating well? How are relationships at home? Like, I think a lot of times people don't understand there's a lot of contributors to mental health, and that we touch on those things too. It's not just all about coming and talking, right? When people say talk therapy, I always say, like, I'm not the biggest fan of that, because I say that's a piece of what we do, right? So I always just say, like, I'm here to help you navigate things. I have a tool bag, and I'm going to teach you those tools, and then you're going to go kind of enact those, and we'll see how that goes, right? And we'll build on that. And that's kind of usually how I navigate how sessions go.
Yeah, like you use the word navigate, because a lot of the time it's almost like the driver and the GPS, right? The GPS can kind of guide you and kind of help you get to your way, but ultimately the driver is the one, you, the client, are in control of how you get there, and obviously which trends you take, right? I mentioned at the start around people that reach out to us. Sometimes it's their first time. Sometimes maybe they've thought about it or tried therapy and it didn't work. And so I'm just curious from the panel, if someone's on the fence, let's say one of our attendees or somebody watching the video, they're thinking about coming to therapy or reaching out for a free consultation. What are some suggestions or insight you might have into somebody who's kind of thinking about it? Maybe they're pre-contemplating or contemplating it, but not necessarily reaching out just yet. What suggestions or sort of things might they consider? Maybe we'll throw it over to Matthew. Let's see if your video's working, and we'll test it out again.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's just kind of came out of nowhere, the technical issues. Is it sounding better now?
It looks good. I want to jinx it.
Looks good. Okay. So I'll go. Let me know if it gets choppy. But yeah, so for someone in this situation, which would comprise, I think, a lot of people, so I would first start by asking if they're willing to talk to someone else about it first, like if they're willing to loop someone in their social circle, and be willing to open up to them and say that, hey, I'm considering therapy. I've been wondering about it, and kind of weighing the pros and cons. So if you are willing to do that, I think that that's an awesome way to begin the externalization process and kind of get that momentum going. It's almost like dipping your toe in a little bit to starting to share your story and talk about your vulnerabilities with someone. So yeah, just kind of talking to somebody about that. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that and you want to either jump straight into therapy, or you're just kind of hesitant overall, I think journaling about it is an awesome tool as well. So kind of weighing the pros and cons, or one of the types of journaling I like to facilitate with clients is exploring two different paths. So it's kind of a reframed pros and cons. It's a little bit different. So exploring path one and writing through your thoughts there and your feelings there, and exploring path two, kind of maybe doing something versus not doing something, or if there's a fork in the road and there's two clear options, exploring those two. And I think that something like that type of journaling through that lens will help you to arrive at the answers you're looking for. And I would venture to say it probably would point in the direction of therapy sometimes, but sometimes it might not, and maybe it'll point in another direction. But it's one way to start thinking about it more critically. And then, after that, you can organize consultations. You have nothing to lose with that. Those are free, and I usually suggest people do at least a couple of those. And yeah, you really have nothing to lose there. It's just a free chat with someone, and if it doesn't go well, you don't owe them anything. You just both got a chance to connect, and you can actually get some value from that alone, even if you don't move forward with someone. So yeah, that's the next stage there, and it doesn't have to go any further. You're never really signing a contract here. It's step by step, and you can explore at your own pace.
Some great points there, Matthew. Thank you. Yeah, I often liken it to dating. Most people don't just date one person and, fall in love and get married and then live happily ever after. It's a process, right? And so, with the consultations, it's a great way to kind of see, is this person a good fit? Does this person, seem responsive or seem like they'd be able to help me have that experience I'm looking for, right? And typically when people reach out, we give them a holistic questions so that they can think about and use for their consultations. Imad, you want to go next?
Yeah, so I think if someone's on the fence, for me, in my opinion, something to consider is why you're on the fence. I think if someone's on the fence because they know maybe in their hearts they haven't expressed it, but they know that maybe they're not ready to really commit to it fully, then it may be in their best interest to wait till they're ready to commit to it fully, because it is a serious commitment, I think, to do it seriously. But if they're on the fence for it because of things like stigma or men don't get help and men don't cry, that kind of stuff, my recommendation would be to meditate on the fact that the concept of the self-made individual there's really no evidence for that. There's nobody who's made it to any level of success, no matter how great, fully on their own. This isn't a thing that exists. We're social creatures. We live in communities. We all get help, and there's no shame in getting help. So I think that's an important aspect to consider. It's like, why are you hesitant? And then based on that, I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I know Jordan's got Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant. If they just said, you know what, I'm going to play basketball. I don't need any coaches. I don't need any support. I don't need any, guidance. I mean, great players, but I think it's also really around, we don't have all the internal answers, and sometimes it's nice to get that sort of impartial lens to kind of see maybe our blind spots, right? We all have them. Morella, next.
I'll echo what you and Matthew have both said about booking numerous consultations. A consultation is not a commitment. It is about you finding the right therapist. And studies actually show that the therapeutic relationship is really what's most important in therapy. So the modality doesn't impact the effectiveness necessarily. It is the relationship between client and therapist. So I always encourage people who are having a consultation with me to go ahead and have consultations with other people as well and find the person that feels right. As therapists, we don't take it personally, because if the relationship between myself and my client is not working, it's not working for me either. And so it really is important to shop around, like when you're buying a car, test them out and see how it feels. And if you get a good feeling, that's usually a good indicator that the trajectory of the therapy will be positive.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a relationship. That's the beautiful word. And sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. And I think somebody else mentioned that, you're not locked into this. You're not, you have as a client, you have you got to sign in and pay for memberships and that kind of thing. It's really on on your terms, right? Which I think is important. Um, so what are some of the common fears that you've heard from your clients? Fears that they've said, you know what, the reason it's taken me so long, the reason I didn't seek help earlier was dot dot dot. I'm curious what some of those are for you. Who'd like to go first?
I could jump in on that. Um, Without being able to maybe say the words, I think the most common answer is probably shame. And I think of having an issue that you're struggling with. Some of the stories that are on this panel were one of reluctance or apprehension, right? And if we think of, I mean, we allow people to solve our problems all the time. We live in houses that we didn't build. We wear clothes that we didn't make. We drive on roads that we didn't pave. And so we are very used to allowing people to help us in 1,000 different scenarios every single day. The difference of therapy is this one feels like, wait, 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 wait. I should be able to do this on my own. Wait, 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 wait. No one else should know this about me. And so, whether or not someone's able to sort of articulate it that way, the thing that drives us into hiding and the thing that makes opening up, making that first consultation call so difficult is kind of the shame attached to whatever that issue is. And so, that would probably be the biggest obstacle that I think people in general face when they're contemplating therapy. And I guess my appeal would be, wait a second, if you can take a huge step back, we actually allow a lot of people to help us all of the time and kind of try to work your way closer and closer to letting just someone, a professional, help you with this issue as well.
That's a great point. Yeah, I mean, I think of like a doctor. Like we wouldn't be prescribing our own medicine or, doing our root canals as a dentist, right? So it's interesting that with mental health, we tend to really, there's more resistance. Um, Jordan.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think one of the biggest things is really just procrastination. I've heard that a lot where, I should have been here 6 months ago, or I could have been here 2 years ago, right? And I don't know why I didn't. And then we get to talking and we find out, well, they didn't because the importance of if you have a list of important things to do in life, it always gets knocked down. Like, well, then the kids had sports, and then, well, then, I had appointments for massage, and then, I got to go to the gym, and so it always got knocked down. And then boom, it hits a breaking point where, if I've let it get to this point and I just can't hold off anymore, now I have to be here. Right. So that's a pretty common one. And I think another one I hear a lot too is like, I felt like I could do blank first, or I could try this first or that first. And a lot of times after some time, they see that those things were avoidance. So, maybe on the surface, they feel like, well, if I just worked out more and I could get my stress out, or, I take these supplements, or I'll just go to the doctor and see about a prescription, and that'll, fix things. And they might get some benefit, but then it always creeps back. It always creeps back. So then, I think sometimes they get a realization, whether it's through themselves or the recommendation, a push from somebody that they care and respect, that they finally end up going, okay, you know what, I think this is the big one. I gotta talk to somebody to get some help here. Those are some common ones that I see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we get a lot more people in the clinic who share that they found us through a friend. And so there's a lot more word of mouth about other men telling other men, hey, by the way, I'm in therapy, or maybe they've noticed, that they are in a better mood, or they're doing better overall. And, there's that conversation around, oh, how did this all come about? And then there's maybe that therapy conversation. So I think it takes some time, but, I think that's just sort of helping that societal kind of, you know, um, idea that men don't seek help unless it's absolutely necessary, right? There can be some proactiveness. Morella.
One of the things, or one of the hesitations that I see often is confidentiality. So clients wonder, am I going to tell their wife? am I going to tell their boss or their husband the things that they tell me? And so, you know, just reassuring them that what they share with me is confidential and that I do not share anything that they tell me without their consent or their permission, barring a court order, you know, a subpoena for my notes. But, and then of course, a few things that we are obligated to report, but generally just reassuring them that what they share with me is confidential and doesn't go beyond the room unless I have their permission.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the beautiful thing about our work is, you know, it's safe in that sense of, you know, it's between us, between our four walls, right? Yeah, with a few exceptions, but yeah, I mean, it's great. I think it's really powerful. Matthew.
Mm-hmm. Hear me okay now? Good. Okay. Yeah. So the fellow panelists here pretty much covered almost all of it, so I don't have too much to add. But the one point I did want to add is that a big one I see in people, just a common response, because I'll ask the question, why now? Versus, of course, you know, other points where they probably could have went or could have benefited from it. I ask why now, and it's usually because, well, often that I've seen is that it just gets to the point where quality of life deteriorates to a point where they don't want to live like that anymore. And I always try to remind people later on is that it's kind of like a ladder that you're sort of dipping in quality of life over the course of time for a while, and then you have this threshold that's a subjective threshold where, okay, this is too much, now I'll seek help. And when we zoom out and once they're in therapy for a while, then we can realize, okay, maybe we should have went a few rungs higher. Maybe we shouldn't have waited to that last rung or that second last rung. So that's a common thing that I hear with people, and I just maybe that will resonate with a couple of the attendees here. And I just think it's something that those people wish they knew earlier. Is that, you know, it's not any harder to go to therapy earlier. In fact, a lot of times it's easier to go earlier before things will get worse. But we have this mindset where we'll wait to that last rung for whatever reason, where we're kind of at our wits' end. So yeah, I just think a lot of people would benefit from that, and you know, going a little earlier on the ladder.
Yeah, great points. I think another misconception is kind of some of our conversations kind of stirred this up is that you know, being in therapy means you got to be in therapy for the rest of your life, you know, and that, you know, I'm struggling with something that is so horrible, shameful, painful that, you know, this means I'm going to be in therapy for the next 30 years. And that sometimes is used as a reason not to come to therapy. It's like, why get started? And so I'm curious from the panelists, you know, how would you normally handle that sort of question in a session or in a consult around the idea of, you know, length of time? When's a good time to kind of be in sort of finish up therapy? You know, from your perspective, from your experience, maybe Imad, you want to go first?
Sure. So, one of the things and this goes back to building on kind of the point you just made about why people, I think, are so hesitant to come. I think to some extent is not knowing where to start. Not knowing where to start. And I think one of the misconceptions about time frame regarding therapy that I address with clients is that for me, and this is why, as I said earlier in the webinar, I tend to gravitate more towards a solution focus and outcome focus, is that my aim genuinely is to get people to go from chaos to order, however you want to frame it, as soon as possible. I don't necessarily think it's helpful for therapy to become a crutch. Now, having said that, there are obviously certain cases and different situations where people do need lifetime therapy or very, very long-term years of therapy, and that's fine. But for a vast majority of at least the clients I've had the experience to deal with, I think it's life got overwhelming. They're in a particular crisis. One thing we didn't really focus on today, and maybe it's not the focus today, I don't know, but couple situations, right? Marital issues, partners, So there's a specific acute crisis to overcome. But by and large, for me, the point of therapy, the way I look at it, my role in people's lives as a clinician isn't to tell them what to do, what not to do, or to have this weekly thing go on forever. It's really to try and get them to orient themselves to be able to put their lives back together as best they can. And the example I usually use is that I think really every problem that we face in life is really two problems. At least that's one way to look at it, which is it's the problem itself, but it's nested in the bigger problem of how do you become the type of person that can solve all problems, right? So I try very hard to not to guide, co-author, plan forward, but not to become a crutch that then they can't kind of go on without you, or they think that, well, what's going to happen in this situation. So anyway, I think I made my point, but yeah, that's kind of how I would go about it.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And Nick.
Yeah, when I think of even where the misconception comes from, if I start therapy, I'll be in it forever. I think that kind of permeates the air because maybe there's a lot to talk about. And some of that's coming from a good place, and some of that might be some polishing up that maybe we can do as therapists, kind of clarifying goals and saying, this is what we came in to work on. Have goals shifted? That's a great question to ask, right? So sometimes when you're working on one thing and you pull on that thread, there are other significant things that come up. But hopefully the goal is not to just keep playing whack-a-mole with every sort of problem in your life, right? So um, a great conversation between you and your therapist could kind of give you a sense of, have you made progress on the thing that initially brought you in? As we've hopefully made progress on this issue, are there other things that you'd like to work on? But just the clarity of the intention of why we're here is a important conversation to have. Maybe a more humorous answer when it comes to couples, a great answer from the gut is, if you and your partner are looking at each other like, wait, why are we paying this person again? Probably, okay, you're in a healthier spot. I mean, things can go wrong, but that's kind of a fun kind of way to think about it. If you are in harmony and you're kind of thinking, I think we're good. I don't know if we need to pay this person further. Maybe that's a kind of a connection and indication that things are coming to an end. And maybe while I have the mic, I'll say this. It's really nice when you can bring closure to therapy. So if you feel like, okay, I think my time in therapy is coming to an end, it's really nice if we can kind of discuss that together. Um, I know it's pretty common that people will just disappear off the calendar and then we see them in 8 months or something, and that's okay too. But the more conversation and connection we can have together, because it is a therapeutic relationship, uh, the better.
Yeah, some great points there too. I often tell clients, sometimes if you're taking a break or you're not coming back, I kind of let the client be the guide of that, right? And so I had a client from day one, 3 years ago, took a long break, and about a year and a half later reached out to me and said, "Hey, I want to come back to therapy." And I said, "That's part of the process, is knowing when you need to be in therapy, when you need to break, and when you need to kind of to end things." And I think sometimes we as therapists we don't get that closure, but it can be really important to kind of finalize and finish things up throughout the process. We've got about 8-9 minutes left. If there's any questions from the attendees tonight, put them in the chat. Love to hear any questions that you might have. We'll throw it over to Morella.
I always jokingly say that if I'm any good at my job, I will work myself out of a job. So that's kind of the goal of the therapist, to get clients to the point where they don't need us as much or at all. Now, I say that kind of tongue in cheek because there are some issues that are quite complicated and they do take a little bit of time. But therapy is always about the client, and the client is in charge. And I know sometimes that's difficult for some clients to understand, that it's not about me as a therapist. And if they feel that they've gotten what they need and that it's time to wrap up the therapy, I might have opinions about that I can share if they ask, but really it's up to them to determine how long therapy goes and if they're still getting a benefit from it.
Yeah, good points. And let's go with Jordan.
All right. I know that we're crunched for time, and everybody did a great job covering a lot of what I I noted to myself here. I guess the only thing was, I go back to the physiotherapy kind of thing, where they're not going to have you come to further sessions. Say they were once a week for a while. They're not going to have you come if you're making progression, right? So they'll say, you know what, you have the tools, so some exercises now, and you're getting stronger. So let's take 2-3 weeks. And how do you feel about that? You know, if there's an agreement there, yeah, that sounds good. If you need me, you know, let me know. Maybe we can set something up. But let's see how 2-3 weeks goes, and then you know, you do that for a while, you get stronger. Then I explain, you know, well, you know, maybe we can do what we call like maybe like check-ins now. You want to come every 3-4 weeks, once a month even, right? And yeah, I think I'm ready for that. And you know, we work with that. Can things come up where, you know what, I really need probably another 2 weeks out in a row again? This came up, sure, that happens, right? So it's not linear like that, but in general, you know, I would say like in general, like there's a weaning off, but that's how, you know, it should go. That's good, right? They're equipped, right? They have the tools, so.
Great, good points. Let's I'm going to ask one question. I'm going to put them all on the spot, all the therapists, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. I'll close up with some final thoughts. So if you're like your first time ever reaching out, you have a consultation booked, what would be like one of the questions you think is really important to ask a therapist in a consultation that you feel would be helpful for them if they were to go in it for the first time? So whoever wants to take this one first, what would be the one question? We'll keep it really short. The most important question you would ask in a consult with a therapist for the first time. I'm putting them on the spot, so we're gonna have to give a sec here. I think for me, it's more around the process, what the process would look like with that therapist, because everyone's different, you know. And the way I usually answer that is, you know, I don't paint every client with the same brush, you know. Everyone is a different canvas. Paintbrush, I have a different tools or paints in my paintbrush or my paint box, but you know, everyone's handled differently because we all have a different story, different background, different strengths, right? So I think learning about the process can be helpful for potential clients. Who wants to go first on this one?
I'm happy to give it a shot.
Okay.
Okay, so for me, I think first of all, it's difficult to answer this. It's important to answer this from the side of really a client and not a clinician, right? So for us, it might be what's the approach, what's the this. I think if I'm being candid, I think one of the natural questions that would come, this is the question that came to mind, and I asked my therapist the first session, was what makes you, you know, what, I don't remember how I asked it, but it was something along the lines of, how do I know you can help me? Right? My situation is very complex. It's very, I don't even know where to begin. How can you possibly help me? So I think, and it's a difficult question for a clinician to be able to answer effectively with very little information in a consult where you don't really know the person, you don't really know the dynamic. But I think it's more of a meditation on how honest you're willing to be in therapy. I think is kind of the precursor to that. I don't know if I'm making my point kind of clearly here, but I think it's trying to understand why that specific clinician would be best equipped to be a good fit for you and your particular set of idiosyncratic issues. And why? Because I think Mela was pointing out earlier, was that the therapeutic relationship, which I think is very similar to a genuine relationship in some ways, I think it's the most important, certainly one of the most important factors. So it's, I think, getting that right fit of why are your skill sets and your approach as a clinician a good match for my specific set of problems and what I'm trying to reach, and finding a match between those. I think that's going to be a very, very important thing to, I think, iron out very, very early on into the relationship. Otherwise, you might go a few sessions and then you see it's not working, and then you waste the time and money, and maybe even regress, which may not be good. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, Good points, Marilla.
Like you, Adam, I get most of a response when someone asks me, like, how do you do therapy or what's your process? And when I can outline it for them really generally, and usually what I say is, you know what, we take a look at your past to understand how you got here and then equip you with skills moving forward so that you can be the best expression of yourself. And when I can summarize it like that, you know, that seems to really resonate with people. And then, of course, like you, it's about an a la carte approach. What's going to work for them, and that's the kind of thread that we follow in therapy. So I would encourage people to ask, you know, what's the theory or the idea that you know, of the therapist that they're working with, and get sort of a general idea of how they work.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. And Matthew.
Yeah, so I think that the question I would ask as a potential client would be, what do you emphasize most in therapy? So I think it kind of gets to the same place that you guys are all getting to with your questions, is that just like learning about the style of the therapist and what they think is important and the type of tools and modalities that they like to use. And then the client can sort of decide if they feel like those would align nicely with their personality type and with their presenting issues. I think ultimately the client would be able to answer that question once they have that information of knowing what is most important to the therapist and what they typically do with individuals, maybe with a similar list of presenting issues. So just getting to know the therapist in that way and how they work. And I always think it's important to connect on a personality level too, to an extent. So honestly, I would also like advise that the client asks, I don't know exactly what kind of questions, but some like probing personality questions a little bit, if they can get creative with that and see if you guys can connect on that sort of level. Because in some of my best clients, like the best work I've done with people, I feel like there's always some sort of like humor involved where we're able to connect on some like weird or unorthodox levels, and then that further builds the rapport and fuels that therapeutic relationship, which, like the other panelists said, I also think is the most important thing. So yeah, just getting to know the personality of the therapist too, if you can.
Yeah, yeah, great. Great points. Nick unfortunately had to just finish. He's got a client. So, you know, that wraps up our time. I really wanted to thank everybody who, you know, joined today. Our panelists, great insight, a lot of information. We have a really dedicated team here. We've got two client care coordinators who are there to answer any questions you might have. As some of our panelists have mentioned, you know, we do free consults, 20 minutes. We recommend doing a couple at least, just to kind of get a sense for who might be a better fit. But as the clinic director, I've really tried to bring on very diverse, different clinicians with different backgrounds and different experiences and education, to really give you different options to choose from. So if you're on the fence, uh, don't hesitate to reach out. Hopefully, we've made this platform for you to feel like you're not alone. I think that's the most important thing. But I wanted to thank everybody for this opportunity. It is Men's Mental Health Month, but for us, I feel like that runs 12 months out of the year. We're really dedicated to it. So thank you again for coming out. Thank you again to our panelists, and we hope to hear from you in the future. Okay. Take care, everybody. Have a great evening. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye.
You.